family with famous relatives like sunflowers, daisies, and is actually very closely related to chamomile. It's known for its distinct umbrella-like blooms filled with lots of adorable five-petaled flowers with rounded centers. Hello and welcome back to another week of Rooted. This week we're continuing our deep dive into the potion ingredients of Macbeth with another famous favorite, Fillet of Fenny snake. If you thought this was yet another instance of reptile rapture, you aren't alone. But I'm happy to report that witches of the time weren't thinly slicing snakes to toss into their cauldrons. Instead, they were turning to a quirky flower that, if you live anywhere in the eastern half of the United States, or any of the dark and gloomy bits of Europe, you've likely heard of Jack-in-the-Pulpit. Jack-in-the-Pulpit, or Oresia triphyllum, is a very distinct wildflower native to northern America. It's a member of the Araceae or lily family, with familial favorites like arrowleaf, snake lily, and philodendrons. There are a few different varieties of Jack-in-the-Pulpit, so they may look a little different from region to region, but for our purposes today, we're going to lump them all together since they're all extremely similar. These plants are characterized by their very distinct flower shape that looks kind of like a pitcher plant. They have a light green to deep purple spadix with very distinctive stripes, and the spadix folds over itself, creating an almost hood-like effect. The flower inside, also known as the jack, is just like any other lily flower. These flowers are typically either male or female, but just like in Jurassic Park, nature will always find a way. They can actually change sex based on what seeds successfully took and what other jacks managed to pop back up. And since these are extremely long-lived perennials, typically lasting over 25 years, it's possible for them to change several times over the course of their lives. You can actually tell which flowers are male or female by looking at the base of them. The male flowers, the ones that produce pollen, emit a sort of mushroomy rotting smell to attract flies, and will have a hole at the base, allowing pollinators to wriggle around in there and get covered in pollen before zipping off to another flower, while female blooms will not have holes, encouraging flies and gnats to stay a while and have a look around before heading out the way they came in, or just getting so lost that they never leave. These guys typically get about 1 to 2 feet tall, and they really don't like the sun. They prefer to stay in well-shaded areas with rich soil and plenty of moisture, which is why you'll typically only stumble upon them in the woods. They bloom from April to about June, then start a magnificent transition. Their hooded spadix gives way to the flower, which is now covered with a dense cluster of tiny red berries, a tasty treat for any wildlife who might be looking for a quick snack before winter. Each berry contains 3 to 5 tiny seeds, which are what I saw most commonly being mentioned as the potion ingredient, though there are plenty of uses for pretty much every part of the plant. It's likely that Jack-in-the-Pulpit, or really any plant in the arum family, would have been what the witches were referring to when they referenced Fillet of Fenny snake, because Fenny back then was a term that meant marsh or bog, and many of the members of the arum family have names like snake lily or snake root, and tend to grow in swampy or marshy areas where the soil is moist and fertile. In potions and spells, it's normally used to celebrate duality and help to provide guidance or wisdom, aiding in self-discovery and spiritual growth. But outside of spiritualism, many Native American cultures have turned to Jack-in-the-Pulpit as food, medicine, and even poison. As a food, Jack-in-the-Pulpit root was often blanched to remove the very toxic calcium oxalate crystals that are contained all over the plant. Once the root has been cooked to remove and neutralize those crystals, it was dried, then cut thinly and eaten kind of like a potato chip. As a medicine, Jack-in-the-Pulpit was commonly used to help treat anything from sore eyes to snake bites, while also helping to reduce inflammation and being used as an expectorant, though not enough research has been done to know exactly how it works. And obviously, this kind of medical practice is best left to those from the culture who have studied this plant and know the proper methods and dosages to administer it safely. Just as Jack-in-the-Pulpit celebrates the duality of nature in its ability to change sexes, it can also celebrate the duality between life and death, as it was also historically used as a poison by the Meskwaki people of the Great Lakes region in what is now Wisconsin through Iowa. They are also sometimes called the Fox people, but that name was given to them by French colonizers who pushed them from Ontario and misunderstood that the chief's name was Fox, not the entirety of their nation. Anyway, the Meskwaki people turned to Jack-in-the-Pulpit to help them in times of war, since it was fairly easy for them to come by and blended pretty seamlessly into the dishes they made, making it hard to detect the poison before it was too late. They would cut the root, but instead of blanching it to neutralize the calcium oxalate crystals, they would just toss it in with some meat and leave it in a giant pot for their enemies to find. Believing they had scored a free meal, the enemy would scarf down their supper without noticing that anything was amiss. That was until the spiky oxalate crystals hit their system, causing gastrointestinal distress, vomiting, diarrhea, and potentially death depending on how much was consumed. Interestingly, Jack-in-the-Pulpit seeds were also used as a way to determine someone's fate or see the future, mostly as it pertained to whether they would live or die. Seeds were placed in a bowl of water and swirled around, and the way they settled could then be read by someone who knew what they were looking at. Kind of like tea leaves, but with a hyper-focus on mortality. Aside from food and fortune-telling, Jack-in-the-Pulpit also played an interesting role in fashion. When early colonizers from England first arrived, they quickly realized they didn't have anything to starch their collars with. And that was a problem because they really didn't want to look silly with giant floppy collars. So they quickly realized that Jack-in-the-Pulpit's roots and the corm, which is the underground bit that allows it to spread, contained plenty of starch that they could leach out and use to keep their collars stiff and uncomfortable, just how they liked them. Today, Jack-in-the-Pulpit isn't used as much, but it continues to play a vitally important role as a wildflower and food source in its native regions, where it's all too often being choked out by invasive plants like garlic mustard, honeysuckle, and other noxious weeds. If you're lucky enough to live in an area where these guys grow, keep your eyes peeled the next time you're in a shady part of the forest, and you might be surprised to stumble upon a patch of them you never would have noticed. And when you do, take a moment to stop, say hello, and appreciate how many unique and diverse wildflowers can exist so close together. That's all I've got for you this week, but I'll be back soon with another planty potion ingredient to dissect with you. If you like the show, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at rooted.pod. We're on YouTube at rooted.podcast, and you can check out our website, rootedpod.com, for transcripts, updates, and so much more. Special thanks to Eric Cluxon for writing and performing our theme music, and of course, a special thank you to all of you for being here. Until next time, be kind to yourselves, be kind to the earth, and just like a plant, drink your water.